Hey, Sam, you come up with that intro line?
You didn't tell me that was today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Writers' Room with Sam and Jim. On this show, we invite aspiring writers into our little podcast Writers' Room to help them work on and develop their stories. You can help us by going to Apple Podcasts and hitting the subscribe button, or better yet, rate and review us. You can also join the conversation that's going on over on Facebook at The Writers' Room with Sam and Jim, or you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Sam and Jim. Now, normally what we do is break story with an aspiring writer, but today we're doing something a little bit different. We have an old friend of ours on board, Tania Lotia, and she's going to be on in just a few minutes. We're going to break fresh story with her, but first, I want to go off about something. Hold on, Sam. Sammy, I want to talk about getting derailed. Now, that's something, a lot of the writers we talked with on the podcast face this problem. It comes up sometimes when we talk to them. But I think every writer deals with it on an ongoing basis.
Definitely.
There you are. You've got some idea, and it's burning a hole in your computer, and you just can't wait to get at it. And then you have another good idea. Mm-hmm. Or then you have to go on vacation. Or then, for us these days, some producer calls or studio calls, oh, and there's a thing, and they want to meet with you about it. And then we have to run off and read a book that we would otherwise never read.
Right.
Or 50,000 pages of different comic books, or whatever it is. And then we come back, and then there's a meeting, and then there's waiting for decisions, and blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, our thing that we were so passionate about is slowly growing stale and moldy in the corner of our minds.
Right. And you're not talking about that we're complaining about being busy. It's just the derailment.
Yeah.
It's just getting away from this thing we're trying to do, which, by the way, when we were not being called by studios, that happened all the time, too.
It's the same process, right? It doesn't matter what it is that's pulling you off task. You always have to deal with finding your way back to your passion. How do you stay on target?
Right. And if you've been derailed for a week or 3 months, it gets harder and harder to get back to it. But it's just the first 10 or 15 minutes that are hard. You have to force yourself to get back on it.
And I think it's where you have to view interruptions. You have to keep them from actually taking the place of your writing time. Mm-hmm. You have to figure out how to leave space for your writing time so that you can stay with the idea until at least you reach some stopping point, or until you get all the key pieces down that are in your head. How many times now have we pulled out a board or a stack of cards or a stack of notes and said, what the hell is this? What is this show? what made this interesting?
Right.
This doesn't make any sense.
Because you've lost complete momentum and you are nothing but inertia.
Yeah, so I guess the point I'm trying to make here is when you see something coming, or if you have any sense that something's coming to push you off target, you have to figure out what it is that's essential about what you're working on and hurry up and get as much of that stuff down as clearly and cleanly as you can before it disappears forever.
And when you come back to it, it's going to be hard, but stick with it. It's the only way. Otherwise, you're going to have a red book like we do, full of orphans and widows that were pushed to the side by life, career, whatever.
Whatever stage of the process you're in, it never goes away. Okay, let's get into this week's show. Tania, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yay.
We're excited.
So, Tania Lotia, for everyone that doesn't know her, we know her because we were on Carnival Row with her.
Working furiously under high pressure for several months together.
That's right. We got brought in at the same time. We all came in together on Carnival Row, and when they changed writers' rooms and they shut down production, and then we had a few weeks to start getting writing before we were going to pick up pre-production and production. And so there was a huge pressure. And when you get into a room under that kind of pressure, there's only two things that can happen.
A lot of blood on the floor, or you become friends.
Or we become friends. And thankfully, Tania, we like you a lot. You may not like us, but we like you a ton.
I love you guys. And I do want to point out that we were also very well fueled by our very professional PA who kept us going.
And that, of course, is JR, who...
I forgot who that was. That's right. That was JR.
That's right. Who, JR, I actually wanted a friend of mine to have that job, and JR boxed him out. But I'm glad if someone had to box out my friend, I'm glad it was JR. And then we worked together. We were just talking, actually, before this, we worked under crazy conditions, including all of us being sick in December, but not being able to leave the writer's room because we had to get scripts out. And, of course...
Wondering now if that was COVID going around back then.
Who knows?
Definitely COVID.
Yeah, that's your feeling. And, if you're right, that means we were maybe a little immune there for a while, and we didn't get it that whole first run.
Mm-hmm.
I had to wait till after I was vaccinated to get COVID. But Tania, you were on Dark Tower with Glenn Mazzara, of course, your Swamp Thing, Witcher, Blood Origins, which...
Blood Oranges or Blood Origins?
I occasionally call it Blood Oranges by mistake. And then Carnival Row.
It sounds like a magical cocktail of some kind.
Right.
This is the Witcher Blood Oranges. Vodka, rum, and tequila. Who knew that would work?
And now you're working on some show we're not allowed to talk about. So you've been busy doing a lot of things. We want to ask you about that. This is what we ask all our professional writer. Can you believe you're a professional writer, by the way? How weird is that when people call you that?
I consider myself so lucky. Like, I think of all the years that I worked as an assistant and before that, and it's just like, I don't know. Every day in the room, I'm like, I can't believe someone pays me to be here. It's so great.
Well, especially after going through all that law school business. Imagine if you'd gone down that road.
I forgot about that.
That would be a real job.
I think my parents still wish I had.
Well, this leads us right into the classic question we ask, which is your origin story. So how did you get to this?
Your blood origin story.
How did you get to this show?
My blood origin story. I always wanted to be a writer, and part of it was, I wanted to write books, I thought. So I think you guys know this about me, but I'm a huge nerd. When I was growing up, I read 15 books a week from the library, and I know that because that's the maximum they would let me check out at one time.
Wow.
So I've always been a huge reader and a writer and wanted to write novels. And I was graduating from college, and I was like, oh, your average writer doesn't make a whole ton of money, so I kind of need a day job and didn't really want to go into academia, so I ended up going to law school. And by the time I graduated law school, with a lot of debt, I realized that I didn't really want to practice law, but I spent a lot of time watching TV because I felt really guilty about partying the way I did in college. So I just so I just stay home, and I just kind of fell in love with television. And it was, kind of the golden age. You had like Battlestar Galactica and Mad Men and The Sopranos and like all these really, really great shows. And so I decided to come back to LA, and I started working at CAA and working my way around.
The Dark Tower of one of the biggest agencies in town, right?
Yes.
So did you think that was going to be a path into writing? I mean, what was the thinking there, or did you just need to pay some rent?
Both, but no, I wanted to learn how the business worked, really. I don't regret it. I think I was there for a long time, and it took me a lot to get to the next stage where I was able to write. But, I got to read scripts at all stages. I got to get to know agents who then, help me get jobs. I'm still repped at CA now. And I got to read a lot of scripts, which kind of brought it around full circle because I actually got in trouble at CA because I guess they were worried about scripts leaking. So they were looking at who was reading all the scripts on the internet. And so they called me in and they said, you have read more scripts than any other person at CAA. Why are you downloading all these scripts?
And you say, because I want to be a writer someday. And they're like, oh, Jesus. Why would you want to do that?
I was like, I'm just trying to learn. Don't fire me.
And they didn't, I hope.
They did not.
Okay.
No.
It's funny about your path, though, Tania, because it's one of those things, it's so hard to take the conventional path or any other path to being a writer in Hollywood. But one of the things that most people don't know and only learn over time is how the business actually works. There's so many things that you don't see that are boxing you out, or you shouldn't even bother trying that, or whatever it is, that once you understand the business better, it becomes like, oh yeah, of course, that was a dumb idea. We shouldn't have tried that. So that's actually a really smart angle on getting paid to figure out how to be a writer.
Yeah, and I think it's also, there's so many things that come up when you're negotiating your contracts, when you're pitching a show, when you're just like our most recent packaging discussions that we were having. There's so many things that it's good to kind of know how the business works when you're in it.
It does, and the wisdom I'm getting out of this is, so people are always asking, how do I get into this business? And I now know one of the answers is you need to take out 15 books from the library every week.
Fundamental.
Then go to law school. Then
so you can be motivated by debt.
Go work for an agent and then start writing. But it worked. That's what you did.
Yeah, it's a foolproof 10-point plan.
Yeah. And then you became an assistant to different showrunners or different shows. Isn't that right?
No, I actually was only worked for Glenn. I was Glenn Mazzara's assistant. I was working at CAA, and one of the agents I grew really close to was Rob Keneally, who really kind of mentored me and read scripts for me, and he reps Glenn. And when Glenn was promoting his previous assistant to be a writer on the show, Damien, Rob kind of pushed me to go work for Glenn and learn the business. And, Glenn's a great mentor and someone who really tries to help writers, especially women, people of color, like to get ahead in the business. And so, yeah, he's been like, one of my closest friends and my mentor. And I call him probably at least once a month. We talk every week, but I call him at least once a month to be like, how do I do this? What do I do in this situation? Help me.
That's great. That's great to have someone to call for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to ask you, coming out of this, what's your advice for new writers? Right, new writers are always asking you, reaching out one way or the other as they do. What do you say?
I tell them to read a lot. Obviously that served me well, but so much of our business, we exist in like a literary canon that stretches back to the entire like biblical literature all the way up to now. And, there's a wealth of TV out there. There's a wealth of like literary material, and bringing all of that to bear so that you can kind of pitch the best story. So yeah, I'd say read a lot of scripts, read a lot of books.
I mean, that's really the key, isn't it? We have to know that. I mean,
you have to be able to recognize good writing when you see it, so that when you accidentally do it, sometimes you go, "Oh, wait, that's what I'm supposed to be doing."
Oh yeah, exactly.
And in the writers' room, we're always calling out different shows, movies, books, things we read constantly just to illustrate a point or to steal from it. Let's be honest, we're just stealing stuff.
Homage.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Shamelessly.
Absolutely, whatever it takes to get us to the next step, because that whiteboard, as we all well know, gets an assistant's going to come and just wipe that thing clean. Right, new words on there, and they're the ugliest words ever. When you're tired, which is episode 6. You're like, no.
And then they fight.
Right.
Didn't we just finish an episode?
Oh, my God. So, and one last thing.
Yeah.
So you're South Asian, for all the people that don't know you and can't see that, of South Asian descent. The reason I mention that is you're on the Writers Guild. Are you still on the committee for Asian writers?
Yeah, I'm the co-chair of the WGA Asian American Writers Committee.
And what do you think? What are the biggest couple issues? I hate to ask you to compress it too much, but what are you working on?
Or the benefits you find from the guild for people to engage with groups?
All of us work really hard, and not just the Asian American Writers Committee, but all the committees, all of the inclusion and equity committees at the Guild work really hard, because what we want is for all of our members to succeed and help each other and hopefully hire each other at some point. So there's like a real emphasis on community, and I think that's really important because, as you guys know, most of your jobs come from who you know, especially after a certain point in this business, rather than your reps. So first of all, it's great for networking, but I think also, we put on events where we have, for example, a mock writer's room where we bring in a showrunner to run a drama room for a night where people can observe and kind of see how a room works, because we have members who are not yet staffed. We have members who are making a transition from features to TV. So it kind of gives them a view of how that works. We have like meet and greets with showrunners, with executives. So there's a lot of like really great opportunities. And I want to say too that it's really, all of these committees are what you make of them. All the events are generated by committee members. It's not a top-down thing. We vote on everything before we do it. So it's really a chance to kind of build the guild and build the community of writers that you want to have.
I can see that being extra helpful too, not just in itself, but as you say, you form these friendships and make alliances on different shows. But then after a season or 2 or 3, whoever knows how long, they blow apart. Everyone scatters. Any community you can help build that you get to stay part of that actually hangs together is great.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think, especially in this era of Zoom rooms, I feel like some rooms are probably going to continue to be that way. So I think it's even more important to build those kinds of community ties.
I mean, even when we were in a room together, just getting out to have a drink was hard enough, because we just spent 40 or 50 or 60 or 70
It was a lot.
It was a lot.
That was just Monday.
And then we had to get home to our wives and girlfriends and boyfriends and dogs and children and all that, and it was hard to do it. And if you're in a Zoom room, then you really aren't. Really, it's 3 times harder, because but even more important, because you haven't had any chill time. time.
Well, when's the real social time when you're not at work?
Mm-hmm. All right, so Tania, now we're going to the part where we're asking some free work. What the show, and I'm sure you haven't listened to it, and if you haven't, I respect you. As you know, JR is going to do is we have 2 log lines that he got from Twitter or one of our accounts, and he's going to pitch you 2. You pick one, and then the 3 of us will start breaking. So we'll go right back to breaking together, which is what we love to do.
Drum roll, please.
That sounds amazing.
All right, so our first logline comes from Michael Amaru, and this logline is 2 inmates escape from an outpost penal colony on a new planet being explored and inhabited following the destruction of Earth.
Cool.
Our second logline comes from Steve Holbert, and this is a show called Secondhand Pawn. It's an horror dramedy about a small-town caregiver who tries escaping his family's business, the haunted pawn shop that they run. It's The Conjuring meets Shameless.
So, Tania, take a second to think about that. Try to put aside the fact that JR's pitching abilities seem to have left the building today. And look at the core of what...
I'm trying to be professional.
What are you saying? That Tania, we're not... What? I think he's right. So which one is it, Tania? What do you think?
I really love horror, so I am going to go with the horror one.
All right, so it's The Conjuring.
That's the one I liked better, too.
Okay.
Good choice.
Also, the idea of writing a pandemic thing right now is...
that was a penal colony, not a pandemic.
Oh, right. That was a penal colony. It's just illness, I guess, is what I'm responding to, and mania.
I think it's the dramedy part that got me.
Okay.
His request for lighter things, having plenty of darkness in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're faced with a story about what's The Conjuring meets Shameless, right? It's a pawn shop. It's a family supernatural thing. Conjuring, so we have things that are conjured, which are not defined. If you want to go to the movie, ghosts. But what do you think? Where would you start, Tania, with this?
I've worked on a lot of really big fantasy shows, and I feel like the thing that I always come back to that kind of helps me make sense of all of them is starting with the main character and working out, because I feel like, we have like a built-in, it seems like a really fun world. And so that stuff is going to already work because all of that stuff is awesome. So let's start with the character and make them someone that we actually care about as they go through the story with all the awesome stuff.
Great. Main character. So woman, man, ethnicity.
So this character is a caretaker in a family business? Is that what you said, Jared?
Well, there's a little bit of confusion there because it sounds like caregiver on one hand, but part of the family business. So maybe they're taking care of someone in the family and being the caregiver for someone in the family?
I think it's up to the interpretation, right?
Throwing it out there.
That's a good idea. What do you think, Tania?
I like, who is he taking care of? Like, if it's, say, he has like an elderly grandparent, and so this is like a young guy who has the like classic, he wants to get out of his town, he wants to build his life, but he has this obligation, and being South Asian, I certainly understand how the weight of obligation. So let's make him Asian. Let's give him an elderly grandparent, and he's the sole caregiver left.
You know what I respond to right away, Tania, about that? Is I love the idea of a dude being the guy who has to take care of the grandparent. It's not a gender. It kind of goes against stereotypes, if that makes right.
Yeah.
And I thought I just heard you pitch making them Asian or South Asian too, which is great because then it's a flavor that isn't necessarily the generic one I've seen 100 times already in other shows.
Yeah, and I think thematically too, a lot of Asian cultures have a lot of reverence for, ancestors and,
right.
And things like that. So maybe the ghosts are, we said it was Conjuring-esque, right? So like ghosts can be people from the family, or they can be people who maybe the grandfather wronged in his life, coming back to wreak havoc.
Mm-hmm. Well, then my question would be the one that is, what's the engine going forward? So are we doing like an 8-episode streaming, we're going to tell one story per season, or, building to it like Witcher, Blood Oranges, or is it going to be episodic, like Supernatural?
Different haunted item or ghost every week or whatever? Or
what do you want to do, Tania? Which one you want to explore today? I know you can do all of them, but which one you spark?
Well, if we're doing a dramedy, I kind of like the procedural version,
Right.
where it's like one thing a week.
Right.
That could be, get a little funnier,
Right.
a little less heavy.
It does seem like those tend overall. I mean, obviously X-Files did not do that, but Haven, ours did. Is that they just, because there's a rhythm to them,
It makes it a little easier.
it does, and it's not,
you're not bogged down thinking so hard about the through line drama. It's funny you mentioned the idea maybe the grandparent had wronged people. There could be something here kind of like My Name is Earl, where there's some way you're making amends is kind of the mission he has to do to get free of the pawn shop, or like to stop things so he feels free to go, something like that.
Yeah, it's like, he has to resolve each of these things, like kind of put things right, and maybe that involves going to the families of the people who have died, but were people who the grandfather wronged. And he has to set something right in each family's life.
Well, I think we're done. It's been great talking to you, Tom.
There's some item that is somehow important, and it's the key to whatever's going on that that our guy has to.
I think that's different from what I interpreted Tania to say. And Tania, you'll tell us, but I thought he's done these wrongs, and he's got to go right those wrongs one at a time in order to redeem his grandfather, so his grandfather isn't haunted both literally and emotionally by all of this. So what do you think, Tania? What were you thinking?
No, that is true. And I like the idea of kind of exploring the repercussions of whatever wrong his grandfather did and how that plays out generationally. So, for example, his grandfather killed someone's dog, for example. And that caused a trauma, and the guy became abusive to his own family and then died, and now we have to play out the repercussions of that. Maybe that's a little too dark.
No, I get it.
Somehow put a dead dog and an abusive dad in that.
I guess the thing I was thinking is, if it's a haunted pawn shop, I was thinking, well, all these people pawned things to the grandfather to the shop, and they're back haunting, and there could be something that ties to the item that is somehow, and it might not be obvious what the significance of the item is and why that's generating the ghost to be there, whatever the story is, but it's part of what brings the story together with the family.
I love that. Like, if his grandfather isn't verbal, say, like, and he has to use
the item, first of all, to figure out who it actually belongs to. That could be really fun. And then if the item, like, it's not an obvious thing where you just return the item to the right person and it solves the problem.
Right.
Like, there's actually a story around that and how that item has to, like, fit in to that person's narrative.
Right. And he has to figure it out. That's what he's trying. That's the procedure.
Right, to lay the ghost to rest.
Tania, I want to throw out something that you did that we're always telling people to do, and it's a classic professional writer move, which is you pitched a terrible idea, and you did it and you did it without compunction, fearlessly, and obviously this is going to get better, because you said, all right, so I killed the dog, and then you blah 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 blah, and you don't literally mean that, but you were unabashed. I mean, you could, but meaning you're unabashed. You don't care. You don't care how good or bad this idea is. You're just trying to build scaffolding to the next thing. And that took, did that take you a while to be able to, in a room with a bunch of people who are professionals, and you have to pitch ideas, and they're not going to be necessarily great? How did that work for you in the beginning?
That's a really great question, Sam, because that is something I definitely feel is a skill I did not have coming into the business. And I think that's something you only get from experience in a room. And yeah, I think there's two aspects, to it. Like, one, being able to pitch an idea that's like not necessarily the right version, but is going to get you to the right version, or get the room to the right version. And then there's building on somebody else's idea, which both of you were able to do, which I think is another skill that you only learn from being in a room. And I don't think I had those things until really, I was co-producer on Carnival Row, and I'd already been in like 3 or 4 rooms for a couple of years. And I don't think until that point that I had it. And just to, not to kiss your ass, Sam, but there was one moment, like, if I consider the point where I started thinking of myself as a professional writer, there was one moment in the Carnival Row room where you pitched an idea, and then you turned to me, and then I kind of opened my mouth because I was going to build on it, and you turned to me, and it was very kind and very generous of you. You said, yeah, make it better. And that was the moment, I think, in my head where I kind of felt the switch, where I was like, okay, now I feel like I actually kind of know what I'm doing here. And I'm not just, like, I don't feel like I'm just here as, you know, almost like a favor or to be like the person of color in the room or something like that. Like, I actually feel like I'm contributing and I'm an active part of being in the writer's room. So I owe you my entire career is what I'm saying.
I got to tell you, if that's your idea of kissing my ass, that is, you got a long way to go, lady. When I turned to you and said, make it better. Oh, yeah, that's incredible. But here's what I think what I'm hearing you say is, I just assumed in that moment, one writer to another, okay, I got it a little further. I have 100% confidence you will carry the ball down the field a little further.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's like a level of trust that you earn from other writers, but you don't have that until you actually develop those skills.
Well, you know, it's funny. I thought you were very comfortable. And we didn't meet until you came in a couple days, I think, after we started. You were delayed. And when you came in, I just presumed, you know, I think we all presume competence. And the funny thing is, but that doesn't mean that the person you are presuming about feels that confidence about their competence. That is not easy to say.
Yeah.
But then you were pitching right away the same combination of there's something really good in there. This is not the right idea, but there's something really good, or just good ideas that's everybody.
That's the lifeblood of a room.
Lifeblood of a room. I thought you were doing it right away. I had no idea that you were.
Well, thank you. Well, I felt personally challenged because, as you say, I entered the room a couple of days later, and you know, the first thing you said to me was, "Oh, you know, you just started today, so we don't expect you to pitch, you know, for today." Right. And I was like, "Well, I just heard a challenge,"
and that's what makes you good, Tania.
Right. Don't you let me off that hook. Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, I have to pitch this. I have to land at least 5 ideas today.
And the truth of it is, we all know that out of the 100 ideas that get pitched in that room that day, even if we land 10 of them and they're fantastic and they're great, really by the time we write the episode, they're mostly gone, and by the time we shoot it, they're all gone, right?
One or two maybe survive long enough to see the light of film.
Right. So we don't get attached and we don't take it personally.
Agreed.
Which is another room skill that takes a long time to build, is to learn not to take it personally when your darlings go to the wall and take a bullet in the back of the neck.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. That one took me a really long time, I'll be honest. And it's something, I mean, it's something, you know, we all struggle, I struggle with even today. Like if I pitch something and, you know, you have that awkward moment where it falls flat, or you pitch something and makes it to the board, it even makes it into a script, and then you watch the episode like a year later and you're like, oh, it got cut. That's really sucks.
Or they mutated it into this thing that wasn't the point of that at all.
Tania.
Exactly. Or the actors just delivered the line so that it's got a completely different emotion behind it.
Yeah. I actually watch shows and notice lines that are delivered. I have no reason to believe this. I don't know anything about the show and the writing of it, but I'm pretty sure that line just got killed, by the delivery. And I thought that's the best delivery of that line they could get out of all the takes, which is why writing for television is a good and bad thing.
Is a bartender's best friend?
Yeah. Anyway,
which brings us back to Blood Oranges.
That's right. There we go.
So back to our show. So we've got this show now that we're pitching, and we have to name the. Could you name the character?
I'm terrible at naming characters.
Well, I was going to name him Dylan Gallagher because that's
Dylan Patel.
Yeah, but who we worked with, but it's an Asian. Okay, Dylan, not Patel, but Dylan something. Forget. Okay, Dylan doesn't matter.
Dylan Wen.
Okay, Dylan Wen. So
Great.
Dylan Wen, DW to his friends. He's taking care of his grandfather, who's not particularly responsive, but is clearly tortured by something. What we need to figure out is, I don't know if you work this way. What's the next step for you now that we know that, and he's going to figure out that he's got to go solve these problems so that his grandfather can be released by this haunting that he's having, whether it's emotional, literal, probably both. What's the next step in your process? I have mine, but let's talk about yours first.
Well, so I feel like we did the fun part, right? Like we did the here's what the show is.
Is it over that quickly, Tania?
No, but now it gets to the meat and potatoes of how.
Right.
How does he find out his grandfather's haunted? How does he find out that these objects are things that can solve the haunting, and then how does he then realize he needs to go put things right?
Right.
And we have to do that in a pilot, and then also have a full story where he does actually do the first thing.
I know. It's unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, the amount, the fact that pilots are absolutely the hardest episode until you get to episode 2. So here's Jim and I kind of diverge here, and we each indulge each other's process with with whatever amount of generosity we're feeling that day. But I like to start thinking about a scene, right? And it's premature. I'm not actually trying to figure out the scene, but just like you were pitching out not a bad version, but okay, kills a dog. Okay, good. Now we understand what's happening here, and we build, and then eventually maybe swap the dog story out for something else. I like to come up with a scene that gives me the soul, the tone, some feeling that I'm trying to get with, so I'm teaching myself the show is what I'm doing when I come up with the scene. Do you ever do that?
Yeah, totally. Sometimes I'll just start the whole idea with some scene I have in my head and then, have to build the entire story and the characters around that. So I totally get that. That works.
And so when I'm thinking of the scene in this case, Jim, do you have a different way to approach it other than scene right now?
I guess what I'm thinking about sort of before that, and I actually like that idea often, is what are some of these characters? For some reason, when we first started talking about this thing, it was like, oh, what if the grandfather's irascible and not repentant at all about the way he screwed over these other people, right? Just to put a spin on that, right? And then just a little bit of how much is it just him and the grandfather? Is there Dylan's mother? What do we have here for a family a little bit to do that dramedy, shameless piece of it? I don't think we need 11 cast members like Shameless, however many they have. But just a little bit of that world that, why does Dylan want out of it? Mm-hmm. How is the hauntings affecting them? What's the grandpa's attitude? How funny is it versus serious?
Right.
Some of that stuff.
And this is where I started getting grumpy with Jim. I'm like, oh my God, you just threw out so many questions and things. How am I supposed to come up with a scene and keep that all in my head? I only have 8 megs of RAM. I can't do that. But a scene
might help answer some of those questions.
Yeah. Right, or at least be the beginning of it. And then we might lose the scene, because who cares about a scene, but we'll start discovering what we spark to, what gets us excited. I'm really intrigued with what you were talking about, Tania, about this Asian interest and about ancestors and basically things that could haunt us going all the way back. And if the grandfather is being haunted, I would love to see a price paid by the family. And then that would pay off in introducing us for the family. So here's a couple pitches. Pitch 1 is you kind of do a Final Destination thing where you're starting out with the family going about their day, and you're worried about having too many characters. Let's kill 3 of them.
Right. I was just thinking, every episode someone in the family dies. There's pressure on Dylan to get to the bottom of all this.
Well, I was just saying in the beginning, all right. And then there's a family meeting, and then they realize the source of it somehow, and now Dylan has to save his family and his grandfather, and that's a lot of pressure. That's shitty version A. Shitty version...
That's kind of cool, though. Let that sit for a second. Let it breathe.
All right. Are we done?
I think so.
Okay.
Oh, good.
We both
order lunch. He brought lunch, right?
Shitty version B, to get the stakes, because I know we're doing dramedy here, right? Or not dramedy, but we want drama with some humor in it. DW, Dylan Wen, brings home a girl. DN brings a girl home, right? Mm-hmm. And to introduce the family. She, of course, is white or black or something that is not Asian is what I'm trying to get at. So there's an unfamiliarity with her, and there's a suspicion. There's all that stuff that comes in when you bring in a girl or boy anyway.
You sort of exposit what's actually going on around here a little bit.
Right, and then so it's tense, and then down comes Grandpa because they wheeled him up to the table or whatever, and he's doing all that grandpa stuff. He's farting and pretending doesn't give a shit how loud it is, all that kind of stuff. But
close the robe. Would you close his robe? Just close his robe, would you?
Just trying to make this as shitty as possible. But something happens. We create this fraught situation with the family, and that's when we pop with the ghost or whatever. Maybe kill someone, maybe don't. I don't know how dark we want to go. That's a discussion I think we should have. Are we killing people? Is that the tone? Because that's pretty intense. But
killing people can be funny.
Right. It turns out the girl he brings home is already dead. He thought it was just a lucky coincidence. He met her and they liked each other. No, it turns out she's got a grudge against the grandpa because she actually died 50 years ago.
Well,
That's actually, I don't think he meant that to be in the.
No,
I think Jim was messing. Don't take credit for something you were fucking around with.
I like that. I like her being connected to it.
I do
think
too.
That's really cool. Like, that's what kind of sets it off, because her grandfather was a person who was wronged by this grandfather, and he starts raising a ruckus because now she's there and she's bringing that presence with her.
I love that.
Sure.
And because I think that girl was actually a woman from 50 years ago who's dead and has some connection to Grandpa.
Or I think, Tanya, you might be pitching she's alive, but her grandfather's ghost, she's bringing that ghost into the house?
Yeah, it's someone tied to her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That he wronged.
Interesting. Or it could be the talisman that's haunted is in the pawn shop, but she doesn't even know about it, but the angry grandfather does?
Yeah. I mean, what if she takes that object and it's not meant for her? So say there's some necklace there and she really wants it and Dylan gives it to her, and that's actually an object that doesn't belong to her, and that kind of sets off the ghost too.
And it just pulls it out of her body in some gruesome, hilarious way, right? That she didn't understand. I mean, I don't know if she dies, but she didn't even, obviously she's just a vessel. She's a.
You just want to kill her, don't you, Sam?
I want to kill somebody. It's The Conjuring, man. That's where we started.
That's true. Well, I don't know. I kind of like him having two problems in this episode.
Yeah.
And one problem is getting this object to the right person. But the other problem is, he really likes this girl and wants to stay with her. Now he has to, ask her to give a gift back that he gave to her.
Yeah. That's interesting.
That's sweet.
I wonder if this is a half-hour dramedy / horror. You know what I mean? Where we could have relatively small, you're not building some whole hour-long chain of events. It could be relatively compact, but still have some good emotion in it.
You mean 30 minutes, not necessarily, yeah.
Well, half hour.
Yeah. But not the old 22-minute where you're really constrained. It's everything's so light and fast.
I think it's tough to make anything really good within a 22-minute structure.
Yeah.
That's trying for drama as well as comedy.
Yeah.
It's kind of the tone of Only Murders in the Building.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
Oh my God! It's okay. I find it delightful and charming, and the right kind of twee. But I can see how some people would not find it the right kind of twee.
Tanya, that is your next production company. When you form a company, your next loan out is the right kind of twee.
Definitely. Tania Lotia, the right kind of twee.
Everybody's looking for that. Everyone wants the right kind of twee.
So
I mean, you can't go wrong with Steve Martin. Anyway.
Yeah, right.
So the idea here is we have this is where I get confused, and this is a common, which is it feels like we have too many ideas, one too many, because how does that talisman tie to the fact that this man has done wrong things over time, and now they're coming back to haunt him?
I think it would go to why he still has the talisman. Why is it in the pawn shop? Right? If Dylan took the talisman from the pawn shop and gave it to the girl, the woman, then it turns out that there's something, that's where the spirit is coming from in that model.
Tanya, what do you think?
Yeah, one version is that the talisman is, so what's haunting, I guess, the ghost or the whatever, I'll just use ghost instead of demon or spirit or whatever. Maybe the girl takes the talisman home and it starts haunting her. So it's more about the talisman not being where it's supposed to be in some way.
Well, what I like is that it feels like that could open up the world a bit, right? It's like if this pawn shop has some customers, and whether, if Dylan gave this as a gift to this particular woman, but these things leave the pawn shop and then these ghosts start kicking in as a way to pull him into these different worlds and has to figure out what the hell's going on. That could be an entry.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit about Needful Things, the Stephen King story, where kind of a devil character sets up a shop in the town and everybody goes to it and, gets the item that they think is going to be the answer to what they most desire.
I didn't read that one, but I'd see that idea. So are you saying then these items are destroying these people's lives, and this guy is coming, not just he's saving his grandfather, but he's also he's helping those families from the destruction that's happening to them?
Or possibly, it just has to go to the right person, and she's not the right person.
Gotcha. Yeah. So now I'm so confused again, because I'm sorry for being dense, but is he taking the item to the rightful people?
Maybe.
Or, because then what's the conflict?
Oh, I guess it's figuring out what's going on and how to appease the spirit. Would be my guess.
Yeah, like I feel like it's not. It can't be just like if I give this to this person, that just solves the problem.
Right.
It has to be where it has to fit into their narrative, or he has to fix some problem in their life, or help them realize something about their lives, and then the talisman kind of fits into that narrative rather than being like, here you go, and we're both parting ways, going off on our merry journeys.
You know, it's funny. We're pitching a little. This is an old-fashioned television show. It's kind of like
I know.
I hear it, and I kind of feel oddly, safe and taken care of a little bit. Like I can put this on, and I know everything's going to work out in the end of this episode.
I feel
it's touched by an angel.
It's touched by a ghost. It is. It is. It's a little bit.
The kind of comedy drama I see going on here feels more like Ghostbusters, or I don't know, Big Trouble in Little China, or some of that older school kind of like, it's a big problem, but it's still comedy at its heart.
Right, and
it's going to get fixed.
And that's the shameless part of the pitch that we got. If they had said Conjuring/Predator, we would have gone in a different direction. But we're saying, okay, it's shameless. Shameless was, light in the middle of all the darkness.
Right.
And it was also about family love. And the reason why he's doing this is, yes, to help his grandfather, maybe help his family, but it's love for the family and love for the grandfather, even though he's irascible and asshole and has, probably done all these terrible things in his life that he now has to fix. Right? Is that what we're talking about?
I agree, and I think like maybe adding in a little edge to it. Like I was thinking a little bit about what you said earlier, Sam, or no, I think it was Jim, about like why does he want to leave the town? Like why is he trying to get away from here? And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to tease out. Is he, for example, gay in a small town and, wants to get out of there? Or is there some kind of, are there no jobs in this town? And it's kind of like one of those places where, all the factories or all the mines have closed and now there's nothing for them to do and it's in place of economic deprivation. Like, how do we make it a little more contemporary and
not generic?
Yeah, exactly.
Not too safe.
Right. I mean, we haven't really we talked about him being Asian, and if we were actually developing this together, I think we would ask what are the ramifications of that,
what are the details that make it interesting,
and make it harder, make it specific to his cultural experience, right?
Yeah.
Which, as two white guys, we could do no problem. I mean, we'd appreciate your input.
Well, you
of course,
do have the
Tania.
universal perspective.
That's right.
That's right. We have Wikipedia.
What else do we need? But no, then to be honest, then we would be deep diving into all your personal experiences and trying to mine, like pulling out everything out of that treasure chest, Tania, right? I mean, that's what you do, I'm sure, when you're writing.
Yeah.
And in the writer's room, we talk about everything. Nothing is sacred, we hope.
Or secret.
So that we can find the truth in the specifics as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's an aspect to the writer's room that's like a confessional,
right? In
some ways, and it's not like, because it's not even so much about like, here's some entertaining thing that happened to me. It's like, here's the deepest, darkest, most horrible thing anyone's ever said to me. Let's put that in our script.
100%.
It really fucked me up badly for about 11 years when someone did this to me. Can we make something out of that?
Yeah, let's talk about that and put it in a TV show so I can look at the reenactment of it for the rest of my life.
Except it's going to turn out the right way this time.
Exactly. Now I get the chance to say that thing that I wish I'd said 10 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Tania, I love how natural it is, and I hope people who listen to this, they get a sense of when you have people that you like and know what they're doing. This is what we do all day, literally.
Yeah. It's the best job ever.
It is.
We got to get in a room together again, even if it's just a bar somewhere.
I would love that.
That's a good room. Thank you so much for coming today, Tania. It's really...
Thank you so much. I'm hoping JR makes me sound very eloquent and intelligent.
Oh, I will. It's not going to be hard at all.
He's been doing it for us for a long time now.
Right.
So.
He's got that special filter.
And that's a tough job.
Yeah.
You guys have great voices for this, too. Yeah. It's really good.
Nice. Tania, we have to hang out soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you both.
See you, Tania. And that's all we've got for you this week. Our producer, J.R. Zamora-Thal, is working the mixing board.
Our logo was designed by Julien Debar-Monclair, and our music was provided by Buddha Rays out of Austin, Texas.
If you want to get in touch, we are at The Sam and Jim on Instagram and Twitter. And you can find us on Facebook and YouTube as The Writer's Room with Sam and Jim.
And if you like hanging out in the room with us, give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And tell a friend, would you, so we can get JR paid. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.